Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the JuggLife podcast. This week we have a classic episode in which we answer the fans' questions, and have a very, very important debate. Who would win in a fight, Terminator versus Rambo? Next week we'll be back with a new episode, so make sure you subscribe to the channel, subscribe to YouTube, visit jtsstrength.com for all your online coaching and Juggernaut apparel needs. Here we go.
Coming to you from Orange County, California, this is the JuggLife Podcast with Max Ada and Chad Wesley Smith.
Hey everybody, Chad Wesley Smith here, joined as always, marvelous Max Montana. Max, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well.
You'll see our setting is a bit different today. We're actually staying at the Haunted Mansion, aka the Amway Grand Hotel in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where we are for the American Open Series 3, the final in the series and the last chance World Team Qualifier for USA weightlifting. But yeah, this hotel we're at, it's really fucking creepy.
There's a 103% chance that it was haunted.
Yeah. If you see any like apparitions crossing the screen, don't be alarmed. It's real. That's a real.
You should make
that's a
the
real
thumbnail like a red circle and be like, "You'll never believe what was in this photograph."
Yeah, I think the same person who designed the Titanic actually did the decor for this hotel.
James Cameron.
Max's James Cameron time traveling theory will have to wait for another day. All right, today's episode of the Jug Life is brought to you by Winstrol and withdrawals. Sometimes you just got that feeling that you're going to be pissing hot, so stay home. We're going to be taking some fan questions, some listener questions from Instagram and YouTube. So getting right down to it. This first one specifically comes from Cameron Bledsoe, but has been asked by a lot of different people in a lot of sort of different iterations, and it's about adjusting training around your job, your work, particularly people with manual labor, physically intensive jobs, or people with shift work. If you're working, third shift, working through the night, or maybe firefighters and stuff who are working 2 days on, 1 day off, or 3 on, 2 off, type of different schedules like that, and how you can adjust. The first part of it is pretty straightforward. If you work a manual labor job, construction, whatever it is, I have a lifter I coach, Adam Rodriguez, who works in like the loading dock of a beer distributor, so he's putting kegs on trucks all night. If you have a job like that that's very physically demanding, you're going to do less volume. That's pretty simple. If someone who sits at a desk 9 to 5 can do 12 sets per week of hard squat training, maybe you can only do 9 sets. But to prescribe it like that is kind of impossible for us to do in this setting, because this is really more about interpersonal differences than intrapersonal differences. Which way is it? Inter is myself. Intra is different.
Yeah. Inter is different.
Yeah.
Than you and I.
So it's on a grand scale. The intrapersonal differences is the people with manual labor jobs on average are going to be able to do less volume and still recover effectively than the people who, with non-physically intensive jobs, and that's pretty simple. But for yourself, whoever's listening and is dealing with this exact issue, I don't know what your MRV currently is, but it's going to be less than, when you have harder times of work, if it's certain busier seasons or whatever, you'll be doing less training during that time than other times. And of course, with that, the way to sort of mitigate how much less you may have to do is to do a better job of the stuff that you can control. So when you have the opportunity, to sleep more, to take a nap or something like that, take advantage of that. Your baseline caloric intake is going to need to be a little bit higher because you're spending more energy with work than you are than someone who's just sitting at a desk. Um, hydration. If you work outside all day, you probably need to put more attention towards hydration. Anything else you think of here?
Uh, no, just the one thing is like scheduling type stuff, but that would also apply to, that probably apply a little more to people that have like firefighting type jobs where you have a little more scheduling type thing. But if you're like a landscaper or something, you're going to be bent over all day, but you don't work on Saturday or Sunday, then maybe selecting Sunday as the day you have a day after a complete day of rest might be your best day to do your heaviest deadlifting or squatting, or those kind of really little intricate details might help manifest themselves in ways that you can kind of have more productive workouts.
And if you have a highly variable schedule, potentially if you're getting called in overtime stuff or whatever it may be, I think doing more frequent, smaller training sessions is going to be better because, and those are going to be lower volume inherently because they're smaller sessions, so that if you have to miss one of them, let's say if you're only squatting once a week, benching once a week, deadlifting once a week, and now your work schedule changes or you're just too run down from work or something, and you have to miss one of those sessions, now you've done that, you've squatted 0 times that week. And I'm assuming that if you're only doing one per week, it's like a big session.
Mm-hmm.
But if you split that big, maybe 2-hour session up into 3 30-minute sessions, now if you have to miss one of those, it's not really that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things that you only were able to squat twice that week. And if they're very small sessions, 2 or 3 work sets, but over the whole course of the week you get to do 9, 10 sets in a pretty normal MRB. I also have athletes who compete really frequently, like baseball players, where they might have 3, 4, maybe 5 games during a week. Also prescribed to the same idea, very small sessions, maybe just going in doing 2 exercises and getting out of there, because if they have a day where they feel too run down and we have to skip that day or significantly alter it, it doesn't have that huge of an effect on the overall week compared to just trying to have these couple big sessions in a more rigid schedule.
Yeah, I've had a few like police that I've coached, Oakland Police Department guys, and their volume is always less. I mean, they're always going to do a lot less volume, but they've made tons of progress. Like, so it's not, don't think that because you have to reduce the volume, you're going to prevent yourself from making any kind of progress. Obviously, volume is a huge driver of success, but these guys probably did some of the smallest workouts we've had people do, and they made plenty of progress. So if it's adjusted well, you'll progress. If you're trying to do too much because you're going to be the tough guy and work a manual labor job or work a night shift and then come in and train, and you're doing too much, you're just going to end up spinning your wheels for a long time.
Yeah, and then I think the last thing to kind of remember with this is the circumstance is sort of what you make of it.
Yeah.
If you go in with the mindset that you're going to do the best job that you can, even though the circumstance may not be ideal, you're going to be a lot better off. Same schedule and everything as someone else who comes in thinking like, well, I can't do as well, or I can't be as strong as that person because I work this tougher job or whatever it may be. So you just kind of got to make the best of your circumstance. And the kind of final thought on this idea is keep in mind, and this goes, if you work construction, if you're police, fire, military, even if you're a student and you have finals and that kind of stuff, is that the body does not differentiate and doesn't understand the difference between training stress, life stress, work stress. All it knows is stress and stimulus. And the more stress that's being imposed on you from outside factors like work, like relationships, like changes in your daily routine, worse sleep, whatever, changes in diet, all that stuff is extra stress being imposed on the body that you need to account for. So if you're working 10-hour construction days, account for that. If you're, having back-to-back, third shift work, overtime stuff, and you're getting less sleep, account for that, and dial back the volume first, and then dial back the intensity if you need to as well on top of that. If you're in finals at school and you're stressed out by that and getting less sleep or whatever it is, same type of adjustment. So whatever that extra stress being imposed on you is, manual labor, shift work, school, big arguments with your significant other, whatever it may be, if you can plan it or it's unforeseen, make those adjustments and don't worry about it. Particularly people dealing with the short-term changes, they're having to change a day, a week, even a month of training, and just getting the best you can out of it is going to go a long way. I think people get so concerned with doing great, optimal, the most optimal training all the time, and kind of the tweak I think you need to put on that is you need to do the most optimal training you can do right now. And if you just have consistently good training and it doesn't have to be PR every single week, and pushing it to the absolute limit, because you usually find when people are doing that, it becomes this PR, injured, and then they're working their way back. But as cliche as it may be, is kind of a slow and steady wins the race type of thing, just getting good, sort of the minimum necessary done all the time.
Yep.
So our next question is much more involved and comes to us from City Strength HQ, which I believe is a Australian company based in Melbourne. Of which 80s, 90s action hero, and the specific question is, would achieve the greatest super total if they all went head to head? As far as their lifting abilities, we don't know if that would be, if we're going formula, total weight lifted.
Yeah.
So we're just going to tweak this.
Impossible to determine that.
Yeah, we're just going to tweak this question a little bit to basically be what 80s and 90s action hero would win in a deathmatch style tournament.
Clearly.
And I have a bracket here. It's pretty official. So Max and I have selected 8 characters into our tournament. On one side of the bracket, we have, from Commando, John Matrix versus Scott McCoy from Delta Force, played by fucking Chuck Norris. On the lower side of that bracket, from Over the Top, Lincoln Hawk, the greatest truck driving child custody film. Arm wrestling, too.
They had some arm wrestling in there, too. It's really a human story piece.
Lincoln Hawk from Over the Top versus Casey Ryback, Steven Seagal in Under Siege. On the opposite side of the bracket, a matchup for the ages, Rambo. I guess, which Rambo?
It's got to be Rambo 4.
Okay.
The other Rambos are, there's 2 Rambo movies that are really great.
I'm thinking we're Rambo First Blood here.
Well, sorry, I thought, yeah.
Yeah.
Rambo, my bad.
Yeah.
Stallone threw me off. He's on here a few times.
There's a lot of Stallone repeats here.
Right.
We have Rambo versus the Terminator. And this is T-100, so Terminator 2.
Yeah.
Which is really one of the best movies, not just action movies.
Best sequel ever.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, what about Break Into Electric Boogaloo?
That was good, too. Yeah. That's true. Did you know Vin Diesel was in that?
I did not know that.
I think he was maybe an extra dancing.
Well,
fast fact.
And the final matchup of our first round, Jean-Claude Van Damme as Frank Dukes from Bloodsport versus the American icon, the Italian stallion, Rocky Balboa from Rocky IV. That's where Max is.
That Rocky IV, yeah. Definitely not the other Rockies.
Yeah. Well, we don't want him getting his ass kicked by Clubber Lang. We're not putting Mr. T in
he lost
here.
in the first one, so you can't use that guy.
All right, so in our first matchup, Matrix versus Scott McCoy. Arnold versus Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris has a lot of formal martial arts training. Arnold is Arnold. John Matrix,
Jimmy's killed way more people.
way more people.
He's killed way. He also. Let's look at the real driving force behind Arnold in Commando. Alyssa Milano.
Yes.
He has to rescue his daughter. That clearly, as a plot device, can turn a man into a super killing machine.
Yes. And I mean, as you could see from mine and Max's remake of Commando, it's a very tender relationship between John Matrix, and his daughter Jenny Matrix. Yes. So he is superhumanly motivated in this. So Matrix, moving on to the next round. Also on that side of the bracket, Lincoln Hawk versus Casey Ryback. Stallone v. Seagal. Once again, we have a formally trained some sort of martial artist in Steven Seagal.
Martial arts.
Yeah.
I think...
And Lincoln Hawk is he's an arm wrestler.
Right, but again, multiplier factor there, possibly the kid. Kramer versus Kramer scenario here. Child custody issue comes into play. Lincoln Hawk, does he turn that hat around? Flip that switch?
Yeah.
He's only got one really good move, though.
Yeah, he just punches the shit out of his face. Like, bah!
Let's just suppose that Hawk gets Seagal's ponytail in that arm. That kind of neck-snapping action could potentially
just smacking him on the table.
Destroying Steven Seagal.
Steven Seagal's making a comeback these days. What are these weird-ass Netflix movies with Steven Seagal?
He just cranks him out. He's probably, I bet you he batches them out. Like he's got like 20 things set up, hires a camera crew for like a weekend, and rattles off like 15 movies.
Who's making more movies per weekend? Porn star or Steven Seagal?
Seagal is on a rate that no one can come close to.
So, we got that side of the bracket settled. Our semifinal, there will be Matrix versus Lincoln Hawk. On the other side of the bracket, this is very tough matchups. Very tough first round matchups here.
Tough one.
Rambo versus Terminator. And again, T-100.
The thing is, they're both unstoppable. And in the end, I think that when Rambo is, he's got crazy. He's got crazy on his side, whereas the Terminator is just a machine. He has no feelings.
Yes.
And so,
but even he has some child motivation as well. Right? Really
he's got daddy issues, I think.
I mean, if John Connor's life is at stake, is Rambo trying to kill John Connor if he beats the Terminator?
Well, from Terminator 2, yeah. He can't kill anyone.
Oh.
In T2, he can't kill. Could Rambo survive being shot in the kneecaps? Probably.
Yeah.
He would probably fashion some kind of sticks for like artificial legs, swing out of a tree. But
maybe some like rickety cricket type of leg braces.
Hypothetical scenario: what killed Terminator 2? Lava. Hot. We're calling it lava. It's molten steel, but lava's better. What was Rambo's go-to with the bow and arrow?
Yeah.
Fire. Fire versus Terminator. Clearly, that's a win.
But it's the Terminator.
That's true. The Terminator could also just kill him.
Yeah,
just kill him. I feel like the Terminator is always underperforming his abilities. The Terminator's like the guy on Instagram who's crushing 300 kilo squats day in, day out, and goes to the meet and bombs at like 80% of that. This guy should be destroying everybody every time.
He did need Linda Hamilton to save him from the T-1000.
Right. And Linda Hamilton's like basically a CrossFitter.
But I can't imagine Rambo defeating Terminator.
All right, you got to call it then.
All right, we're going. Terminator moves on in the battle of Rambo v. Terminator. And our final preliminary matchup, Frank Dukes, Jean-Claude Van Damme in Bloodsport versus Rocky Balboa from Rocky IV. This is all-time...
This is a great battle.
This is the UFC... Original UFC, back when it was like different styles, markedly different styles against each other, this would have preceded that.
Yeah.
And
That's where they got the idea, I heard.
Yeah.
Someone presented this idea to them.
There's like a teenage Dana White and his, playing with action figures in his bedroom. Like, oh, Frank Dukes, I bet you could beat Rocky.
So, okay. I'm going to list off some pros that I think would help Frank Dukes against Rocky.
Okay.
Footwork moves. We've seen in the beginning of the film, fantastic dancer. He's got the footwork, right?
Apollo really worked on Rocky's footwork, though.
That's true. That's a counterpoint, actually. Frank Dukes, blinded by sand.
He can fight while blind.
He can fight, right? And he's got a hefty dose of American spirit behind him.
He does, as well as remarkable flexibility.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Unholy flexibility. The type of flexibility where you can be strapped into some sort of weird S&M torture stretching device by your stepfather, adopted stepfather. The beginning of Bloodsport, the opening sequences of Bloodsport, is without a doubt the worst acting
Possibly
that has ever made it.
It's very possible. It's
into a film that's released. It's like they dubbed over it and then dubbed over it again.
They only had one copy of it back then, one VHS copy to do, so they had to dub over it twice. They just couldn't. They dubbed the original, and they were like, "Well, fuck! Now what are we gonna do? We got to redub it to make it work."
And when his master's son calls Frank Dukes Round Eye.
That's enough. That's all for today.
Not yet.
Why don't you quit, Round Eye?
It was more acceptable back then.
I hadn't seen the movie for a while, and I saw that it was coming on TV, and I started watching it, and I was like, holy shit, this is the worst acting I've ever seen in my life.
Pretty rough.
And then just the blatant racism.
It was a different time back then.
The reverse white privilege that he gets. But yeah, so we've got a mixed martial arts style, let's say, with Frank Dukes versus Rocky. And it's
where's Rocky never loses. Well, no, sorry, no.
He does lose.
Rocky never
loses
quits.
often. Yes,
he never quits.
Yeah, I mean, he defeated Ivan Drago. Because if the fight was Frank Dukes versus Ivan Drago, I'm going Drago.
Yeah, that's true.
Dukes v. Rocky, I guess it depends on the rules, because this is almost a McGregor Mayweather scenario.
Yeah. Does he try the hammer punch to the back of the head?
Yeah.
Or?
But Rocky does have diverse fighting styles.
Right.
He defeated Thunder Lips. And I think the trump card in all of this is that Rocky defeated communism single-handedly.
Right.
I mean, through sheer force of will. And if you can defeat communism, you can defeat Frank Dukes. So, Rocky, moving on. I mean, now our semifinals matchups: John Matrix versus Lincoln Hawk, and Terminator versus Rocky. Matrix versus Hawk. I mean, John Matrix doesn't have a ponytail to grab onto, so Lincoln Hawk's one.
They're both motivated by child custody on some level.
But Jenny Matrix seems really sweet.
She's much more lovable.
Yeah.
I really hated the shit out of that kid in that arm wrestling movie.
Yeah. Lincoln Hawk's
He was a little bastard.
He's one of the biggest pricks
Just a puss.
ever. There's so many times where he would have just left him on the side of the road.
Oh, yeah. He was a soul-sucking little troll. In that movie.
Like when
he is awful.
When he gets him to beat those kids who are bullying him in arm wrestling, like Lincoln Hawk should have just traded his son for
Jenny Matrix would have killed those kids. She would have. She would have snuck in. She would have let him tease her. She would have snuck in later, and they're sleeping, and cut all their throats, and probably shot their parents too.
She can't sneak up on anyone.
That's true. But
Just
she
like
can't. No, she can't sneak up on her dad because
he smells people coming.
It's John Matrix.
You gotta stay downwind. Stay downwind. So that's Matrix.
Yeah,
I think handedly defeats
no problem
Lincoln Hawk and his one move in this. He just takes his hat, throws it to the side. Says, "Oh, what you gonna do now, bitch?
Yeah,
that's your one superpower. Turning your fucking hat around, and now it's on the ground. I killed an entire island of some sort of Mexican type of rebel army.
Yep.
I cut my own wounds out with.
Yeah.
Matrix.
Have you seen the behind the scenes of the Commando?
Oh,
Watch that.
the
Tell me that he's
yes.
not winning that fight.
The behind the scenes of Matrix on YouTube is pretty
It's
excellent.
incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
So
the
Matrix
next-
moves on to the finals. Then we have Terminator versus Rocky. Epic battle again, but I think we go back to the trump card of Rocky can defeat
Communism. Robots are basically communism.
Yeah, I would liken.
Skynet is communism, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, a lot of similarities there, I think.
I don't even need to go any further with that. That's it. Communism and robots, artificial intelligence.
And Drago's like handler guy, and it says that he's half man, half machine.
Right. Okay. So he's already done this.
Yeah.
He's already fought this battle. He already beat Ivan Drago, so he already knows how to defeat a robot man.
Yeah. He unified the world. He defeated communism. Rocky could punch through the Berlin Wall if he so needed to.
I wish that was in the movie. I wish that scene had been in the movie. I wish they'd put that in.
Are there deleted scenes in the
Maybe there will be the deleted scene of Rocky punching through the Berlin Wall.
Rocky 9? Yeah, so I think we're moving on. Rocky versus Matrix in the finals.
This is tough. John Matrix, driven by his child being captured, probably not by Rocky, but we'll still use that motivation. Rocky, motivated by ridding the earth of communism, but John Matrix represents all that is America.
It's
And
true.
all that is great about America.
Do you think will Rocky be wearing any type of homoerotic S&M chainmail? during
Would it
this?
matter? It's never
a good
prevented John Matrix from killing someone before.
That's a good point. And Rocky has never killed.
That's true.
Rocky only
He's
very, very
and he never
dramatically punches people so hard that even the wind from the punch makes their head snap back.
That's true.
But
That's
Matrix
true.
is killing everyone, anyone and everyone.
Right. And I mean, I feel like Matrix could also, and this may be kind of violating some of the rules, but Matrix may be the same guy from Predator.
Oh,
Very similar character,
Yes.
possibly in a previous life. Has killed an alien? Robots, aliens, same category.
hmm
I don't know. I'm going to say Matrix. I'm going to say John Matrix wins.
I agree. Matrix is the winner, with the only possible caveat being if Rocky's robot,
From Rocky
Rocky
Four?
4, comes in like a WWE type of scenario.
Tags him out.
Yeah, and
How intense
Matrix
would
is
that
about to come, but the ref's back gets turned. The robot comes into the ring, hits Matrix with the steel chair. Then I think Rocky could win.
Right, then Rocky could pin him.
But barring any robot interference or ghost, or if the ghost of Apollo Creed becomes involved,
Like, the ghost of Apollo Creed could be the winner of this whole thing.
yeah.
What would happen in a fight between the Terminator and the robot from Rocky 4? They're both machine.
What about Small Wonder versus Terminator?
Or short circuit.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. In a very roundabout way, John Matrix would defeat all other
Yes.
action heroes in a tournament deathmatch. I mean, if it was lifting, yeah, I'm putting my money on Arnold
For sure.
there as well.
Arnold, definitely.
Yeah. So moving on to our next question. We have a couple type of questions about this. You may know that I started training jiu-jitsu. I'm a white belt with no stripes. That's as white as it gets. So I had a question in here about strength training for jiu-jitsu, and then also programming and combining conditioning with strength training. So even though I am a white belt as my own jiu-jitsu practice goes, even though I was choking the shit out of people on Tuesday morning, I actually do have a lot of experience training athletes in jiu-jitsu. At one point, I had about 12 black belts that I ran their strength conditioning for. So specifically for jiu-jitsu, and you can kind of extend this to MMA as well. And I've fallen into this same trap, is that the coaches get too caught up in like the circuit training and conditioning on top of conditioning. If you have someone training hard for jiu-jitsu and doing, quite a bit of specific training and rolling pretty hard, and even more so MMA guys who are training boxing and wrestling, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, all these different things, they're probably getting plenty of conditioning and definitely plenty of more intensive interval type of work as they're working through rounds. So compounding more of the same on top of that is probably not necessary. So what I'd really encourage you to focus on is the foundation that's going to be the foundation for almost all speed power type of athletes, sprinting, jumping, and throwing. And then you can tweak those exercises based on the athlete's qualification into more special strength type of drills, particularly with the throws. If you can have access to like really heavy med balls or sandbags, even doing like heavy rotational throws with that can be great. Overhead backwards, really heavy, up into 50 plus pound throws can have a high carryover. And then just getting the guys generally strong. The athletes that I had the opportunity to work with, most of them had moved here from Brazil and had, I think, very little general preparation background. They had done jiu-jitsu for their whole life, and in some cases, trained like Kyron Gracie, Carlos Gracie's son, so like Prince of Jiu-Jitsu, basically, and he'd been doing it his whole life, since he was 2 years old. But because their life was so wrapped up in jiu-jitsu, they didn't have, gymnastics, or even, I was surprised that most of them hadn't even played soccer or anything, which was very evident by watching some of them try to sprint. But getting them exposed to more general movement patterns and general strength training through the movement categories of squatting, of hip hinge, hip extension, of upper body pushing, upper body pulling. And I say movement categories there because when you're looking at selecting exercises for athletes, non-strength athletes, people who don't play a sport with a barbell, back squatting, straight bar back squatting to powerlifting depth isn't that important. Bench pressing with a barbell and pause on your chest isn't that important. Deadlifting with a straight bar from the floor isn't that important. What is important is giving them strength stimulus through these important movement patterns. So, that it might mean that the squat movement pattern, a goblet squat, front foot elevated split squat, rear foot elevated split squat, step up, safety squat bar, front squat, box squat, belt squat, any of those could be appropriate. You have to look at, does the athlete have good enough technique to perform movements safely? Are they good enough at the exercise to load it in a way that's going to provide the necessary stimulus that you're looking for? So if they just suck at an exercise and they can't put any weight on the bar, they're not going to produce any strength stimulus, right. And that's what they're in the weight room for. And then third, how does it fit in the bigger context of their plan? Is it taking too much energy away from sport practice, that type of thing? So if you're choosing exercises appropriately within those three parameters, within those categories of squat, hip hinge, hip extension, upper body push, upper body pull, I think you'll be on a good track. You don't need to compound conditioning on top of conditioning for athletes who are already getting that in their sport practice, and their sport practice is very aerobically demanding. What you'd probably want to do is include more tempo style aerobic activity that's going to improve aerobic capacity while also helping to facilitate recovery without beating the athlete up anymore. That could be running, swimming, light sled pushing in different submaximal intensity intervals. Then to go a step beyond that, as far as combining conditioning with strength training, what you're going to want to do there is look at developing a high-low model or high-medium-low model to where you can consolidate your most intensive conditioning days if you're going to do stuff like high-intensity interval training or like sprint repeats. You want to have those on the same days that your most intensive lifting is, particularly lower body weights, because if you try and spread them out, and if I tried to run, and this is not me because I would not actually try and do this, but trying to run multiple 200 meter or 400 meter repeats on Monday and then try to come back on Tuesday and snatch and squat, your legs are going to be so tired from Monday that it's going to make you have a bad workout, and your legs would never be able to recover as the week progresses like that. But being able to consolidate them into the same day allows you to have these really high intensity days, and then reserve the next day for more recovery, to build recovery into the structure of your training plan. So yeah, you want to consolidate intensive stressors like sprints, jumps, throws, your big weight room movements, so weightlifting movements and squat, bench, deadlift variations onto the same days, and then have other days that are reserved for more lower level aerobic work, whether that's steady state stuff, whether it's tempo based stuff, along with like accessory weights, so you can build a structure to the training, whether it's high, low, high, off, something like that. High, medium, low, off, high, medium, off, something. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but you don't want to be putting high intensity day after high intensity day, because the athlete's not going to be able to effectively recover. So that's a very brief look at a big topic in regards to that. So our next question comes from Bobby Lifts Things. Do you think he even lifts?
Possibly.
And Bobby asks about the difference in training weightlifters of different body weights. And this is going to be useful for powerlifting training, for weightlifting training. But so, Max, what are the big differences you see between training lightweight lifters and heavyweight lifters? And of course, the middleweight lifters will fall in between.
A lot of it is in how you ridicule them. Heavier lifters, you can ridicule their body, their excessive body weight. Smaller lifters, you can't, right? If you got abs, you're kind of screwed.
Well, you can ridicule them for lack of body weight.
They're too small, too skinny. The biggest one is volume, right? As the lifters get larger, they're going to do less training volume than smaller lifters. Also, from a standpoint of a long-term development, the bigger lifters are going to develop over a longer period of time. So if you take all situations being equal, the bigger lifter is going to develop maybe a little bit slower, but over the course of a longer period of time. So because they can continue to gain body weight, they have to take advantage of that, and they have to continue getting heavier and heavier and heavier until assuming we're talking about supers rather than just like a 105 or a 120 or something.
And some of that too is going to be because the heavier lifter is probably more reliant on strength qualities,
right,
and the lighter weightlifter more on their speed and explosive qualities,
right,
which are going to diminish faster.
Right, and the larger you get, the more importance there is on the absolute strength, on the level of absolute strength, rather than just relative strength. Whereas a smaller lifter, as they become, more experienced, better, higher qualification, they don't need to spend as much time developing, the squat to be, in excess of the clean and jerk by any significant amount. With supers and larger lifters, that scale is more skewed to the side of being stronger in an absolute value.
And the size difference is important in regards to the volume, as Max mentioned. Not only the body weight of the lifter, but also the height of the lifter. If you had two lifters in the same weight class of significantly different heights, the taller lifter would probably do a little bit less volume than the shorter lifter. And we might be splitting hairs at this point. It's like one set less per week, 1 or 2 sets less per week, because they're moving the bar further with every set, with every rep. So they're actually doing more work, assuming the weight was the same.
Right, and then also, on the other side of that scale, as the weights become absolutely larger, it's going to change the recovery, right? So if you're for a power lifter, if you're squatting 900 pounds versus a smaller lifter who's squatting 600 pounds, there's going to be significantly more time to recover from a 900-pound squat.
Even if those squats are relatively the same level, like say they had the same Wilks for the squat, the absolutely heavier squat in general is going to take longer to recover from. Now, the particular athletes doing them and their genetic differences and lifestyle differences would have to be taken into account, but that's too big. It's impossible to say in this situation.
The same in snatch and clean and jerk. A good example would be like Mike Fox. Mike Fox did a workout last year where he clean and jerked, I want to say about 135, 130 in that range, about 6 times in a workout.
And Mike Fox is our
He's a 56.
56 kilo national champion and remote athlete with Max, and he's 5 feet tall.
Maybe 5 feet tall.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was in the middle of a giant, the whole week was an enormous amount of volume. Had very little trouble recovering from those workouts. Contrast that with somebody on the higher end of the scale. Like Colin Burns might do 2 or 3 singles in the clean and jerk at his top weight, and maybe even less than that. And he's only a 94. So if you're getting up into the supers, somebody who's clean and jerking 135 for a 56 is basically the American record. Take the same for a super, the American record's 237.
Yeah,
I would be hard pressed to believe that Kane Wilkes is doing more than 1 single repetition with that weight in an entire week, or maybe even 2 weeks.
I mean, I've seen him do 230 once.
One time, yeah.
I've been recovering for 2 years.
So that's a good practical example where you see that. It's also more evident with women, right? Smaller, lighter females are going to do that way more often, way more heavy attempts in close proximity to each other frequency-wise than larger. I think that Alyssa is probably doing more near maximum and maximum clean and jerks in a week and a month than someone like Sarah Robles, right?
And then females of similar qualification doing more relative volume at a higher relative intensity and more frequency than their male counterparts, because the lack of testosterone makes the training response less significant for them. And also females will become detrained more quickly. So they have to keep training up more often, and that will relate to their taper, as well as they're going to train heavier, closer to competition than a similarly qualified male would, even if they were at the same body weight. Let's say a 58 kilo female versus a 56 kilo male. The female is still going to train maybe one day closer to competition a little bit harder than the male would.
Something to remember too is that while it's possible to take a super or take a really large lifter and make them do similar training programs to small lifters, and they can, in a sense, get away with it. You might have them being successful. You have these big lifters taking very heavy weights very often in training. You'll see the results in competition where they don't succeed in the clean and jerk, because the residual fatigue is still there. They're not actually recovering from it. It's easy to take somebody and push them hard through a training system or a training program and have the results appear to be successful in training because you're driving really hard, you're pushing them, there's motivation, their body weight's a little heavier. They go to competition and then they see a drop off of this, and it may be less indicative of them being bigger and whatnot, but it does play a big role where they've done so many heavy attempts in competition that they've never actually had a chance to recover for it come time for the competition, right? If you space these out and you appropriately dose the amount of heavy attempts leading up to competition for heavier lifters, you get a much better response at the actual competition, right? You would see, sure, a power lifter might be able to squat 90% of their best, 5 or 6, 7 times in a month before the competition, but the amount of time it's going to take them to recover from that kind of overload is going to be too great for them to peak at the meet properly.
Yeah, just because they can do it doesn't mean they should do it.
Right.
So sort of the big takeaways from that are, the bigger the lifter is, the lower volume of training, the less frequent of overloading. The smaller the lifter is, the higher volume, the more frequent. Females relatively higher in all regards than males. Now, the degree of change there isn't huge. If we were to look at an athlete's MRV, so the maximum amount of work that they could do in a week, again, it's going to vary individual to individual based on their genetic capacity to recover and their lifestyle factors like sleep and diet. But all things being equal, which they rarely are, if we had a 62 kilo male, a 85 kilo male, and 125 kilo male, maybe the 125 guy can do 10 sets of squats per week in whatever overloading range that we're in, while the 85 is doing 13 or 14, and the 62 is doing 16 to 18. It's not a massive difference, and it's not the type of training that changes.
Right.
It's the magnitude and the dosing of that training that's going to be adjusted. I think people always are amazed if they were to see mine and Marissa's programs next to each other. That even though they're as different physically as could be, the program is not.
Yeah, it doesn't look much different.
Yeah, it's just more sets here, a little bit more frequency here, different taper lengths and stuff, but it's not a change in type of training, just degree of training.
Yeah.
So I think those were some good questions today.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, we got to get out of here before the ghosts of the Grand Amway start messing with us. Max, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Max_Ada. On Facebook, you can email me at maxjtsstrength.com, or you can go to juggernautonlinecoaching.com.
No, juggernautcoaching.com.
Juggernautcoaching.com.
One day he'll get it. And you have seminars coming up in Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara, the 30th of September. Rochester at Park Avenue in
Rochester, New York.
Across at Park Avenue on the 8th of October.
Something like that.
With Pomponio. And I think that's it for the year.
I thought you had another one that you just announced.
Oh, yes, Massachusetts. I don't remember the exact date of that now. We just finalized it the other day.
For any of those Max at JTS Strength, shoot him an email.
Shoot me an email.
A few days after the release of this, Marissa and I will be in Philadelphia at Warhorse Barbell. Still some space available for the Saturday night programming lecture. So everyone loves to spend their Saturday night. And then I'll be in Minneapolis at the Movement Minneapolis on October 28th for a similar type of programming lecture. Still space available for that. Both of those are sold out for the practical days. So if you want to come and learn how to design programs for big people, small people, advanced people, beginner people, men and women, everything in between, we'll talk about the principles that guide that type of programming. That's the Jug Life. Please subscribe to the channel. If you enjoy the podcast, go on iTunes, give us a 5-star review, write us something funny, and maybe we'll read it on the air, which I totally forgot to do today, but I'll remember another time.
If you disagree with anything in the bracket of the 80s people, it's okay to be wrong.
It's okay for you to be wrong.
Yeah, we're not wrong.
Yeah, I hope that there's a spirited debate in the comments.
That would be very
section.
nice, actually, to see some more in there.
I think the more in-depth analysis that someone can get.
Really, what would be, you need to support your argument.
Yeah.
If you're going to make claims, then I'd like to see a very thorough explanation of how this works.
Cite your sources, a biomechanical breakdown of Lincoln Hawk's face smashing power.
Maybe find the tensile strength of Steven Seagal's ponytail. See if that factors in.
That's another episode of the Jug Life. Thank you for listening or watching, and we'll see you next week.